Good afternoon, Josephina.
Afternoon, Sid.
I know it has been a big event prep season for you. How are you holding up this week?
It's very busy. It's very busy, but I think this is all part of the game. It's all part of the game. For me, I enjoy challenge, and it's definitely challenging when you're working in environments where sustainability is a bit of a journey. But I think
Mhm.
that's all part of the game. Improving and working on emerging markets that want to take the journey to the next step. So yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about the note you sent over, especially the idea of the outsider advantage in sport. It is rare to hear someone articulate the intersection of governance, community trust, and commercial strategy the way you do.
Sure. So I think from my perspective, I was recruited in by my lovely CEO, Ed Edwards.
Mhm.
He had a vision essentially looking at golf and looking at sport, and it's very, traditional. It wasn't built to be a corporate entity. It wasn't, built with governance in place. It was built because people love the sport, so the people working in it are a fan of the sport. And that has its pros and its cons. The pros are, it's very player led, it's very player centric, but the cons are that lack of governance, that lack of maybe like strategic understanding of like financial management, legal matters, compliance, that long term impact insight. And from my perspective, I came from a legal background. I worked on human rights. I worked on, strategy within the um, diversity, equity, inclusion space across policy making, and then consulted across a number of different sectors. And so I bring, how can I say, a bit of a squiggly career to sports, whether that's like legal issues, whether that's strategy policy issues, whether that's governance, whether that's, equity impact. And I think having such a squiggly career has really helped because I'm able to kind of wave that flag for, have you thought about doing this differently? Or have you considered X, Y, and Z? So from that perspective, I think I'm an outsider because I joined the sports sector pretty much in 2024, but I
Mhm.
bring with me all of that insight in terms of how you do business well strategically and how you look at impact strategically. And I'm able to connect the dots, I think, between different sectors and the role that sport has in society. And it's a huge one. And I think there is something in saying almost when sport is trying to almost change the world, is it a role that or responsibility that is beyond sport? Are we trying to kind of push for too much or ask too much of sport? And so when
Yeah.
I am able to connect the dots and say, rights holder, you work with this governing body, you work with local authorities who are also wanting to achieve the same thing, which is job creation, tourism, spend in their local society.
Mhm.
Joining up those dots, I think, has really helped. And that's why I think, although I'm a bit of an outsider, both career wise and also I'll say, from my as a person, like being a young black woman in sport, especially in the leadership space, um, bringing all of the different like intricacies about myself to that, I think is super, super valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, love it. And you know what? He told me about sport being an immature industry full of opportunity. And what you said really stayed with me. And I want to get into that today. So, yeah, let's get into it.
Let's.
The following is a conversation with Josephina Oji, an impact strategist who bridges law diplomacy, sustainability, and business transformation across the sports world. This is PreZeroSportsTalk podcast, and I'm your host, Sid Bensalah. Today, we delve into the power of being an outsider, out of the box, the soft power of social and environmental value, and how sport can rebuild trust and drive meaningful progress. Thank you so much for tuning in, subscribing, and supporting the show. Your support and financial contributions help us bring authentic voices, real stories, and conversations that go beyond the game. If you would like to support the show, please check the episode description for more. Josephina, welcome to the show. I'm really glad we get finally to do this.
Yes, I am. I'll be honest. It's been a long time coming, trying to plan this amidst the most busy event season. But yeah, I'm super glad to sit down with you and speak.
I want to begin with the story behind your journey because it shapes everything we will talk about today. So you have moved between government, diplomacy, justice work, sustainability, and global sport. Did I miss anything here?
It's been a long list. It's been a long list. I feel like I kind of coined squiggly careers before it became a thing, if I'm honest. And just naturally, I've always been super inquisitive. I'd be the child who would ask all the questions, why, always debating at the dinner table. And my parents would always be like, you need to be a lawyer because you don't know how to shut up. And I think to a degree, so I'm an early 90s baby. And from that sense, growing up and in school, we did not have that how can I say it, that career trajectory that I think Gen Z maybe today has. And in that sense, it was very like, you're 18, you're 16, what do you want to do with your life? And so there was if I'm honest, kind of very few pathways offered to us in terms of, you should probably do this, you should do that in terms of a career advisor at school. And so for me, it felt naturally to fall into law. So I studied law with international relations. I tried not to do pure law because I kind of on the side was thinking this is a bit boring. So I took some electives in that space. That was a good idea because then I was exposed to politics on a global scale, why governments are doing certain things and why they're trying to influence people, and also like the social contract of society, and everything was super interesting to me. Eventually, I found myself in the human rights space. So I did work on criminal justice issues, equality, diversity, inclusion within the employment space. And I felt quite a strong affinity to the fact that there are individuals who are literally potentially having their liberty at stake and they can't afford to have a lawyer. So they have to rely on legal aid. But the government is cutting funding to legal aid. So how are these people going to get represented? And connecting the dots and realizing working in law is working at potentially the point of like the worst point where you can't actually address any issue. It's reached the point where it's a litigation, it's a problem. I wanted to take a few steps back. I wanted to try and work on these issues before they reached a legal point. So I essentially transitioned into government and started working on criminal justice system policy because I wanted to try and look at, for example, the court service. Like, how can we make this more equitable? How can we give people a fair chance before it reaches, the state where they are, having to face the judge and the jury, in a sense. So I worked across government, transitioned into the Foreign Office, which allowed me to work on global issues. So I've always had that thread of equity. How do we make things fair? And at the Foreign Office, and I would say in the health department, were my biggest kind of areas where I was able to really kind of flesh that out. And I worked on some really thorny issues. And for example, how do we consider diversity and inclusion when looking at national security? You've probably seen like the conversation around terror and, the way stop and search is used. And if we don't have good, connections and relations with communities, how are we going to prevent these issues? So I was really raising the flag for diversity is super important in these conversations, equity as well. When we're like trying to get, different countries to vote in our favor at the UN, why are we not leveraging Black British people or other ethnic minorities who exist within the British population? It was really interesting. We did at some point look at things like, when we spoke to Nigeria, we actually had Anthony Joshua, the British Nigerian boxer, actually engage ahead of some of our summits. Cool. Yeah. So it's like it's not negative, it's a positive thing. Recognizing that diversity is a strength and a soft power has always been a common thread in my career. And so it eventually led me to working in the pandemic on health equity, which was another super important aspect. Like, we want people to get vaccinated, to get tested, but are we speaking to the right communities? Some communities, the traveler community, they don't, potentially not watching the news or listening to the radio. You have to go out and speak to them as a community. So has always been, how do we look at equity and diversity, inclusion and social issues as less of an issue, but more as a opportunity?
Yeah.
And that eventually led me to the private sector. So I had to take a step back from government because of, if I'm honest, red tape and politicization was preventing me from being able to have the most impact I could have. So I wanted to be able to advise, not as a civil servant, because I was probably maybe a little bit of an anti-civil servant, like in terms of not following the rules and challenging. So I had to take a step back and be a consultant. So I did advise government, I did advise private sector, and that allowed me to have a bit of distance to be able to challenge really strongly, and also opened me up to a sector that had less red tape, that was open to innovation and challenge. And so in that space, I worked with the finance sector who, through the cost of living crisis, were looking at ways that they could give back to society. So financial education, that sort of thing. I was opened up to commercial bidding because I think that's super important, putting your money where your mouth is. So when you're bidding for a contract, what value are you going to provide to society? So I think that making that shift from legal policy to private sector has given me that unique lens to be able to say, how does the private sector work with social enterprises, charities, to resolve the same issues? Because you're all trying to resolve, whether that's a societal issue like job creation, the economy, or it could be air pollution, etc. You're eventually, there is a point where all of these parties have a sweet spot where they're trying to resolve the same matter. And I think that lens has led me to be able to have the impact I'm having in sport currently. And yeah, I was essentially headhunted because my CEO felt that he wanted to shake things up in the golf space particularly, but then sport more broadly as well. So that's what's landed me in the world of sport.
And especially on that, I'm going to shift slightly to a question. And since you were talking about your career and I've been listening to you, I had in the past many colleagues, they choose the legal career and they pull the plug. I don't know why. Maybe it was too difficult, it was too tough, or maybe it was too boring, Josephina, for our young audience, if you have to give an advice, if they are thinking to pursue a legal career, what will be the best advice you can give?
Absolutely. And I have had to give my sister this advice because she also did a law degree. But yeah, so I am going to be a total straight shooter here because I think it's necessary. I know that when I'm speaking, I know that people from lower income backgrounds are listening, and I have to be honest. So I went into criminal defense law. I went into human rights. Those areas are super interesting, and you get to work on potentially the most important area of law, in my opinion, because it's people's liberty at stake. However, on the converse, because they are publicly funded areas of law, the funding is minimal. It's been limited. It's been cut by government. And you may struggle in the sense that you have to kind of make a decision if you can financially withstand a career in that space, if I'm honest, because there are cuts. You can't expect to be on a super high salary. There is a cost of living crisis. So I think that is worth considering. The other aspect is you could then, go into corporate law, which for some people less interesting, but you will be better paid. There's an opportunity in that space to work on some pretty interesting areas. I think at the moment, if we look at AI and the developments in that space, there's going to be a lot around like contracts. There's going to be a lot around compliance, data protection that will be coming up. And I think there's potentially some really interesting areas to work within the corporate space. My advice would be throw yourself in and get experience early as possible, because actually, when I was 16, I went into like Snaresbrook, my local court, and I kind of would just sit in the gallery and just listen to, the cases and watch, what the barristers were doing, and just throwing myself in like that, or interning at your local high street law firm. Super important, because I think there isn't enough clarity on the realities of life as a lawyer and the different types of
Right.
lawyers there are. So I think it's really important to throw yourself in and see, is this for me? Because doing that also kind of made me realize that I found corporate law to be not for me, because I found that drafting contracts and reviewing contracts all day probably is not what I want to do if I was going to do anything. So I think it's really important to throw yourself in and try to get experience. And when I was in the legal space, there were quite a few, I would say, um, initiatives that actually looked at targeting ethnic minorities and people from lowest income backgrounds. I think it was Target City Jobs, the Black Lawyers Division, Urban Lawyers. So those are organizations I would recommend you to get involved with if you come from a background where, you don't have, uncles or aunties who, are already in the space. So
Okay.
that's my recommendations, I would say. Yeah.
And and winning an argument, how do you develop qualities like, for example, the way you talk, the way you, of course, beside of all the research that goes with a case, from a persona standpoint, how do you develop that while studying law?
Sure. So I think to a degree, it does need to come slightly naturally to you, to in the sense that you need to
Mhm.
be somebody who is inquisitive. You need to be somebody who is always asking questions, reading. For me, that was natural, because if it's not naturally there, you will struggle. And the other thing from an equity standpoint is you might find yourself playing a role. And I think when you get into that space, it starts to become slightly dangerous, and maybe not your best position to be in. I'm quite conscious that people should always be doing what they were meant to do, what they're called to do. So I think there is that need to really take some time to look at what brings you joy in life, and to start there. Um, at school, at university, there will be mooting. So mooting is an opportunity to almost go into the role as a barrister or a lawyer
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
act out cases. There will also be opportunities through work experience as well, debating societies in school. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities for you to, practice your voice, but it will come in time. And for me, it's definitely something I think about. Particularly, I would describe myself as an introvert. I think some people would say I'm not, but I think maybe I am. And you will learn your voice. So for me, it's been almost like reflecting on, what is authentic
Mhm.
to me, and still using mannerisms that are yours and not feeling that you need to play a role, I think is
Yeah,
important,
yeah.
because we need to see more varied people in these spaces. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. And my last question, would AI replace lawyers? Since we're talking about the youngsters and how tough and difficult for them to choose, prior going to university or choosing which career. We keep hearing, maybe the last 2 years, that AI is going to replace this job, that job, etc. And the legal industry is not immune. So, what's your take?
Absolutely. So I do spend quite a bit of time watching young creators online on social media, and I feel like the topics that they are talking about very much align with this. There's a lady, I think her name is Steph, the founder, and she posted this really amazing video, which is basically the fact that the AI that we as general population are using today is nowhere, it doesn't scratch the surface on the potential of AI.
No. Yeah,
Chat
she's right.
GPT, generative AI is really very basic. There are already in existence more developed platforms that you pay for, where if people who can afford to, there's Claude and other versions which essentially are not operating as an input LLM, which is basically like you just asking a question and getting an answer. They are building actual entities, and they are building apps, and they are building potential companies. These AI agents are. So just to give you an example, you could ask an AI agent to create an assistant, a secretary, or a contract reviewer, and those are actual jobs. So we do have to recognize that the potential of AI. What I will say on the converse is that my view is that, and I believe from like reading in this area, that AI cannot be allowed to just autonomously operate. There will always need to be
Yeah.
people to manage AI, whether that's technically or from an ethical standpoint. I think because companies will be concerned that if they allowed AIs to operate autonomously, there would be that legal risk to them in terms of any issues that
Right.
occur, who eventually would be, carrying the weight of responsibility. So I think seeing this as an opportunity to upskill, my ethos is always continuous improvement, continuous learning. So I took an AI ethics course over the winter break. Like, it's really important to wherever you see AI maybe impacting your potential field, upskill on it so you're ahead of the curve, so you know how to broach these things. Because one thing is that a lot of companies at the forefront are looking for when they're trying to hire people is people who understand how to use AI. So I think view it from that lens, and hopefully that should be put you in a better position as time develops.
What surprised you most when you stepped into the private sector from working for the government or being a public servant?
Sure. So I think, if I'm honest, I'll touch on upon that point that I think government work, specifically as a civil servant, hasn't had the best PR over the couple 5 years, if I'm honest. And as a civil servant, I do want to raise the flag that really important work has been going on over the past 5 years. At the same time, people working in government have faced multiple changes. Like, government has changed several times, even within a particular party, several different leaders. And then
Tell me about
it's
it,
insane. And
especially where you are.
the ministers as well. Like, every day is a new minister. So I think it's really
Yeah.
important to register that working in government is difficult. It's trying to address serious, major issues which affect everyone in society, the economy, healthcare, security, big issues. And there are people working on these things and tirelessly, and yet the PR that they have has been not very great, if I'm honest, and is not representative of the people working hard within government. So when I make the transition, one thing I was quite conscious of is never downplaying like anything that I did previously, because I think super important work. What was positive for me was that there is red tape in government. So when trying to deliver some of these things I'm discussing, I have to go through like several stakeholders to get approval. And, it can be one person that blocks it and it's not going anywhere, which is, not the best. But in the private sector, particularly, I would say the company I'm working for at the moment, 54, it's very entrepreneurial. It's very kind of it feels like a startup. So we're encouraged to innovate, to challenge. And for me, that's been very positive, because that's always been the theme that I've carried throughout my career. And what I will say has been interesting, and has definitely been something I had to work upon, is recognizing that, how can I put it? You kind of are operating as an entity where you have to almost fund your way. So you can't just come at things from this is the right thing to do, we must do this. You can't only come at things from an altruistic perspective. And I think this is really important for sustainability and social impact, especially diversity and inclusion. I have always been somebody that raises the important flag for the business case of these things. Now, I get and I 100% understand this is the right thing for us to do. However, in a society where there is so much pushback at the moment and politicization and saying, why do we do this, particularly when budgets are stretched and tight? If you do not make a clear business case for doing these things in terms of why it's a competitive advantage to the organization, why it is opening them up to emerging markets, for example, you eventually will falter. So I always have looked at that as being a key area to develop. And it's been something that I have taken forward from my government days into private sector, that the business case behind social issues, social value, environmental
Right.
issues is at the forefront. So I think that has been my almost my crux that I've had to kind of, work on. Yeah, as I made the transition.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said you've been headhunted, and for sure, your company or your CEO now, your boss, he had the criteria list. I'm just curious in terms of why they picked you. That's number one. And number two, how does not coming yourself from traditional sports background give you an advantage in shaping impact strategy?
Absolutely. So I guess he'll have to answer why he picked me. But what I will say is in the interview, the kind of things I spoke about
Mhm.
is the fact that I think, and I've mentioned it before, social value, social issues, working on these are a soft power. They're a competitive advantage. And being able to have that lens is quite a unique lens. And I think it's because I've worked on these issues within different sectors across legal, across government, across, consulting, and having that outsider view and being able to kind of really play the offense has really kind of helped me kind of champion challenge and innovation. And I'll give some examples. So golf is one example. I definitely came into the sports space as, somebody who, didn't know much about golf because, I wasn't exposed to it. Um, I come from a working class background, from like North East London. It's not something that I would naturally be exposed to. Um, but I approached joining sport as an opportunity to learn. So I would sit down and I would talk to people who have, lived and breathed golf for their past, 20 plus years. And I really took from that this is an amazing sport, but it's built by, people who enjoy the sport, who maybe are ex-players of the sport. And it's very much that player perspective, but it lacked that corporate entity, traditional
Right.
governance, almost like in the space where Formula One was like maybe 20 years ago, if I'm honest, that member-led approach, which is great for the game, but not great for the longevity of the game, if I'm honest, because of the strategy and that important
And
aspect. Yeah.
yeah, sorry to cut you, Josephina. What was your perception prior taking golf about the sport itself? What was exactly your perception?
So, if I'm honest, it was the stereotype that it's for
Hmm.
older men, businessmen
Hmm.
who, white men probably, who want to,
Yeah.
work on some negotiations and do some business deals. So I was
Right.
very surprised at the ambition when I joined and what was possible and what we have achieved. So if we look at, I think one example of that is Live Golf, we have to say. I really back what Live Golf is trying to achieve and is achieving. That's one of our clients. We cover the non-US events. For me, the growing the game of golf is not just an altruistic right thing to do in terms of giving people
Right.
access to green spaces, urban communities in London, and we have introduced them to the game of golf, which gives them access to green spaces. Also gives them access to, well-being as a health and well-being outlet, and career opportunities. But there is also the aspect of this being beneficial to golf as a business. So if we look at like the Korean event, the Korean culture has had like a huge wave, like the whole K-pop culture, and that is actually reflected in the Live Golf Korean event. We also have the PIF South Korean event. The numbers that the events are able to drive, the connection to culture, and the kind of new audiences this is opening up golf to, this shows you that when you are working on, social issues, diverse audiences, it's not just altruistic, it's also paying it back. There is a return on the investment there. And I
Yeah.
think there's something about noting that Black audiences as well aren't just a charity case. So
Mhm.
in South Africa, for example, we're going to be in South Africa for the first time at the end of March. That event is looking like it might threaten the Australian event because there is so much demand and interest in that event. And we're looking at, how can we support Black talented golfers as well to move from amateur to professional. We're also looking at targeting the event to Black professional audiences as well, paying audiences. So I think it's really important to look at social issues and looking at, DEI, not just from that altruistic perspective, but also this is
Yeah.
helping you enter emerging markets. Like this is actually helping your business. And I think will help the golf product. I know some people are skeptical about Live, but its potential of what it has to support golf to grow and for longevity, not just socially, but environmentally. Events, venues are impacted by the environment. You have to water a golf
Yeah.
course. In many of our locations, there are droughts. So if you don't consider these issues, the golf course won't be there in a few years' time. You can't justify the value to the land that you're holding. So from my perspective, I see it as a power for the golf industry. Yeah.
Right. What blind spots do insiders sometimes have that outsiders can't see clearly?
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I think it's the ability to partner and work across horizontally. I think sometimes when you're so caught up in an industry, it's you view everyone as a competitor. And me coming in, I almost have no qualms. Like there's nothing for me to gain or lose in this. So the conversations we're having at the moment is about how do we join up governing bodies? How do we join up golf courses to share best practice, to um, fund some of these sustainability needs for the industry. And that's definitely something which I'm continuing to push. We're working with the likes of GEO, which is the sustainable golf entity, and how we can look at, joining up, parts of the US and other parts of the world who work in golf to achieve similar aims. So I think that ability to, collaborate as opposed to viewing other entities as a competition, I think is
Mhm.
definitely one of those.
And did you face any challenges for being an outsider in this industry?
Yeah.
Where quite often, I must say, the sports industry, as far as we see, it's like this box, and we don't see beyond that box.
Yeah, absolutely. I will be 100% honest with you, and I think I need to speak
Mm.
at this from a nuanced perspective. So I'm young.
Mhm.
I'm in my early 30s. That in most
Mhm.
rooms that tend to be young.
Threatening. It's threatening.
um, uh, Black and female, and also from a
Yeah.
working class background. And then also I'm an introvert as well, I think. But so I'm almost like a triple threat or more. So from that perspective, there is so much nuance there. And so when I walk into a room as a Black woman in
Mhm.
sport and also in golf, I'm a super minority. When people meet me and they're like, "Oh, you're the director," it is something to say.
Interesting.
And I think it's really important to talk about the different experience that a Black woman would have as opposed to maybe a white woman. So when we talk about gender equity, I think it's really important to add that nuance into it as well. So I do want to touch upon, because I think one of the topics which is live at the moment is the whole Eni Aluko situation and her speaking up about her views on gender equity in the sports world. So I do have to say that she is pushing for gender equity. And if I'm honest, I feel like there's a bit of misogynoir at play because the the essentially the thought that she's trying to portray is that there isn't enough female representation at women's football games, and that is an absolutely
Okay.
fair point to make.
Yeah, it
So
is.
my issue is that her speaking up, obviously, she's in doing that, she is putting a spotlight on a very strong male leader within the football space in terms of Ian Wright. And a lot of her peers are scared to kind of stand up and back her. And I feel like she is taking a
Right.
lot of risk in speaking up about that. And many people are not backing her. And I think there is something to say in that she is spotlighting herself. And often Black women take a lot of risk and spotlight themselves. And there's very little reward in doing that because she's waving the flag for gender equity. I've seen other women do this and they are backed and they are supported. And she's pretty much being torn at. I don't see her getting the support that I think she should be getting. She's taken a risk, obviously, putting herself out there. But there is nothing inherently wrong with campaigning for gender equity in the women's football game, which I don't see an issue with the argument that there should be more female pundits taking like the studio roles in final games for women's football. So I think that's something to just comment on. Then I think as a young woman, I think there is a different experience between a young woman's experience versus an older woman. Sometimes age can act against you in the sense that both ways. So as in the sustainability world, there tends to be a lot of older women that hold the kind of like reins. And I think when you come in quite young, there is like a sense of, do you have the experience? Can you speak? Are you an expert? And then I think the flip reverse of that is that sports entities, sports organizations, 54, I'm in my early 30s, but I feel like I'm one of the oldest people amongst my colleagues. Like this is a very young Gen Z staff employee base. And I think there is something really interesting about that because you learn from different generations, but it's also interesting in terms of how you carry yourself. So Gen Z, I think, approach the workplace super differently from us. I think they view it as less of a, this is my entire life. And it's more like, this is a means to live. Like I'm doing this job because, I have these hobbies that I need to fund, but this job is not maybe like my all and my everything. Whereas I feel like maybe in my generation, millennials, like often your work can define you. So I think it's super interesting. And I think personality also has a role to play as well. So I am what I feel is one of very few like introverted leaders. I will always say that like as I navigated leadership, I've always kind of thought, do I need to play a role at times? Like, do I need to be more gregarious? And sometimes in meetings, like, do I need to speak if I don't have any points to raise? Because if I don't speak up, I'm not, putting myself out there. These kind of thoughts do crop up. And I feel like where I've landed is that words are powerful. And when you know your stuff, you can say fewer words, but still be powerful. And I think when I do speak up, people pay attention because it's, oh, okay, she has something to say. There must be something, there must be something there. So I think there is something in that sense of like,
look, this is so interesting, and thank you for your openness and honesty, Josephina. So you said you are young, Black woman, not from the sports industry, absolutely not. Knowing, let's say, basic knowledge about golf, yeah? Now, when you enter a room in that space, how on earth do you manage to build trust, especially in the sports industry?
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. And I think you can't come at this with ego. So
is it your legal, let's say, I don't know. I'm just trying to picture the
scenarios, absolutely. I think,
is it your legal background? Is it?
If I'm honest, I think there is something in me personally, in my personal values and the way I operate. I do have a lot of audacity, and I feel like to work in sport, you need audacity. You need to be able to enter a room and feel like you deserve to be there. Because if you enter that room and you are like, I'm not sure, you will probably be drowned out. Because if I'm honest, there are a lot of egos in sport, as you will know. A lot in golf. It's even worse.
It's a big.
it's yeah. So I'm backed by self-belief. I grew up in an environment where I'm Nigerian. I think Nigerians have a lot of, we have pride in ourselves. I grew up, I was told like, I'm smart. I have a lot to give to the world. Like my experience also is essential. You need to have work experience. And I think I've worked across several fields, my legal experience, my government experience, challenging places, if I'm honest. So when I enter the sports industry, yes, it's challenging, but I've seen worse, maybe. I've seen some really difficult scenarios, political scenarios. I've handled difficult stakeholders. So that experience really is a backbone for me. And when you know your stuff, what I will say is there are very few, I wouldn't say very few, but there people that understand sustainability, understand social issues very well. There are few of us in sport in the sense that when we speak, many people maybe don't feel that they have the level of knowledge that we do, or like, so there is that. I feel like there is that slight benefit in the sense that you tend to be the expert on that area. Very few experts on that area. So when you do speak, people do listen because they feel maybe they aren't as capable in that area. That has its pros and its cons. I think I want to see more sports persons and people, get involved in like environmental debates and so on. But I think that definitely gives you need the foundations. You need to have, done the work before you arrive, but also believe in
Right.
yourself because there's young people, entering sport and, you need to believe in yourself that you have something to offer. And that definitely helps. But it's not easy, Um, and choose your battles. Not every conversation you need to kind of headbutt individuals, but choose, strategically what is the best way for me to, make this point. Or sometimes I try and help people think it's their idea, even though it's mine, because there are ways
Yeah.
to get your point across or to achieve what you want. You have to be strategic. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about all the various events I worked in. Major events, quite often we have a big team doing different tasks in different departments. And I've seen it quite often. Young women, when we are debating or having a briefing or a debriefing, they always, quite often, they have to try harder, And I like what you say. Sometimes when you don't say anything, people maybe they take it, maybe she doesn't know everything, or you know what I mean. And quite often in those meetings, it gets overwhelming. If you have to give any advice, and I must say, it's not secret. We try to put everyone at ease, because we know they are there. They've been selected to do a job based on merit, not based on gender, not based on the way they look, etc., etc. And the success of the event, it relies on the team, he or she, But in your case, if you have to give an advice to youngsters, young women, what would it be, Josephina?
Sure. So I think you've definitely touched upon a an important area, and it's not easy. Um, for young women in particular, you're underrepresented from your gender, but also from your age perspective. I think before you reach this point, it's really important to know yourself. So before I entered, the role that I'm in right now, I have been through so much and I know my foundation and I know myself personally, and I know my strengths. Knowing yourself and knowing your value is super important because you have that to fall back upon. When, a stakeholder tells you no, or when somebody tells you you're not good enough or doesn't listen to you, you can separate those opinions from your self-worth is really, really important to do that, because internalizing will turn you, you will end up into a place where you're not allowing yourself to achieve what you can because you're internalizing these false opinions of yourself. So I think, really understanding your value, taking some time to really compartmentalize what do you bring to this organization. Look at your personal skills, look at your education, look at your, your particular attributes that you bring, and actually sit down and write them out, make a list, reinforce that. I do really, really kind of emphasize like having visual reminders. So like in my office, in my at home, I will have like if I get a message from a client that was like really pleased with something I delivered or an award or something, put these things up in your space. Like remind yourself of your value. I think it's really, really important. Communicate when you achieve something. I think sometimes I think social media at the moment, sometimes people can feel like overexposed or like,
Yeah.
LinkedIn can turn into like a ball of just congratulations on everything. But I think
Yeah.
it's important to reinforce and to speak up on your achievements, because
Right.
when you can go back and look at everything you've achieved, it will remind you of your worth. Um, I think allyship is super important as well, I will say. Having
Hmm.
male allies, especially senior male allies, I think has been really helpful for me in my career. So
Hmm.
you need to network, you need to build relationships, because one of
Hmm.
the things that I think has helped me definitely is when I'm not in the room, who advocates on my behalf. So when I'm not in the room, I
Right.
have people that say, you know
Yeah.
what, this topic, Josephina should be in this meeting. Let's invite her.
Hmm.
Like, or,
I like
yeah,
it.
that. I think
I
it's
like that.
super important. Somebody who, rates you and, promotes you when you're not there, really, really important. So that, I think, building connections um, has definitely helped. So yeah, know your worth and also ensure that you have allies that can, speak up on your behalf when you're not around.
Good. So you have described the sports industry as immature, and I fully agree with that. What makes you say that, Josefina?
So I think I have entered initially like the golf space, which I think probably has contributed to that. Don't get me wrong, there are sport entities within the industry that are much more mature than golf. But I think
Mhm.
if we look at sustainability, for an example, um, what other sectors have been able to achieve or what they regard as normal or standard best practice. For sport, it is a journey of trying to get people to achieve the basics sometimes. So I think it's not necessarily a statement to kind of point fingers and say like negative things, but more this is an opportunity. So the fact that we, how can I say it, there are entities within sport that are just starting to look at their carbon footprint, are just starting to consider reporting. This means that we're not in a space where we're drowning in regulations. Some other industries I've worked in or been exposed to, if we look at construction, if we look at oil and gas, if we look at finance regulations, they are drowning in regulations. And the sustainability professionals in that space, I do feel for them, because you will spend 90% of your time gathering data and reporting and producing reports that nobody is reading. So it's almost like you're not doing the thing that you studied so hard and are so passionate about doing. And I think
Yeah.
sport, the immaturity I'm speaking about, is an opportunity. Not to say that we don't gather data, because data is important to gather, but we have
Mhm.
the ability to tell stories. We have the ability to get people passionate and to care about the environment, because we can link it up to venues that might be impacted, your favorite football pitch or golf club that might be impacted. So we have that ability to take different approaches, to look at data points that aren't on the GHG emissions protocol, like happiness. How do people feel about their environment?
Yeah.
Sentiment, things like that. We have that ability to look at these nuanced areas because we are not drowning in regulation. So I think the immaturity of sport is an opportunity, and I think we haven't even scratched the surface, if I'm being honest, with what is possible um, in that space, and I'm excited about what is possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you. And it goes deeper as well, Josefina. We are not using, and when I say we, sport as such, we are not using the power of sport to really communicate the message. You're talking about the environmental impact, which is important. Those folks that spend hours and days and time to generate data to submit all those reports, which are important. And like you say, few people have the interest or the time to go through the entire report, you know? And when they do, the question is, okay, what am I going to do with the findings? And the reason is, and I'm not talking about the lack of funding, lack of money or budget, absolutely not, but the will to do the right thing using the power of sport. And you said something very important earlier, the community, you know, and making sure that the community are full aware, meaning the supporters, the fans, etc., etc. And on the other hand, sustainability as a word, as a such, is being so politicized, where people, when it comes to trusting the decision makers, wherever you turn, in UK, here within the EU, in the US, Australia as well, wherever you turn, people, they don't want to, they're kind of tired of the same music. So, yeah. So, where do you see the biggest gaps based on your experience or previous experience in governance strategy and long term planning
Yeah.
with what you're doing right now?
Yeah. So I think as it stands, I've spoken about storytelling and the importance of that. I
Hmm.
think there is something around fan behavior, because that is the data speaks for itself. So 70 to 90% of the biggest impact in terms of potentially negative on the environment comes from fan behavior. And also, if we look at numbers, fans are the biggest stakeholder group in sport. So, from a social perspective, are we leveraging our fans and our communities where events take place? I don't think we are as well as we could. So one of the really exciting things I am working on at the moment is a fan behavior app, which can potentially influence fans to take up more sustainable behaviors, whether that's hopping public transport to an event, or purchasing vegetarian or vegan food, using a reusable bottle, various things. Because I think at the moment the industry is very much compartmentalizing. So your marketing people are just looking solely in the lens of like the game and you know the actual sport itself, and then your commercial partnerships are just looking at like, okay, who can we bring on that can bring on the most money for the client, etc. There is an opportunity to work together with people in sustainability and impact, and this is what I'm trying to drive, that collaboration, because there are purpose-led partnerships that can be brought on, such as food and beverage partners that are women led, or SMEs, or giving back to the local economy. There are also opportunities for commercial partnerships that can also provide prizes that are environmentally friendly for fans, etc. When you're looking at merchandise, and then marketing, there's an opportunity there as well. So through the fan app, which would sit on the traditional sports right holders app interface, you can give fans that you thought might not have cared about the environment opportunities to engage with the environment, opportunities to engage with social issues on the app. We need to look at things in a more cohesive way. I think currently it's still a bit siloed. So what I'm trying to do is create that connection between the different people who work in sport to understand that we can jointly work at things together. Yeah.
Okay. So you talked earlier about the golf, the your perception of the sports itself. And I remember 30 years ago, 3 decades ago, maybe slightly more, golf as a sport, mainly the governing body, the international governing body, they try to revamp completely the sport in terms of reorganizing the sports and to take that perception of elitist, of reserved to certain group, etc., etc. And they have this slogan, "Golf for all," and that was more than 3 decades ago, Josefina. How is it now?
So I think I can only comment on the my perception as an outsider
Hmm.
coming in, and what I've seen change since I've kind of viewed it as an outsider to being somebody within, and at this point in time. And what I think is interesting is the join up that I'm seeing. It's gradual, but it's happening. So there are industry events. For example, there's trade shows, there's England Golf that put on like industry-wide events. There's also think tanks that put on events that bring together people from all sides of the industry. And I think when these events occur, we are seeing that strategic thinking starting to happen. I think there were some events focused on like water management and how like we can look at recycling rainwater and all kinds of things. And there's industry events that are looking at how do we fund sustainability. Conversations we're having with GEO at the moment is about bringing together high net worth individuals who could be like members of a golf club or investment bankers, or also looking at crowdfunding for sustainability for golf clubs. So I think the collaboration and collaborative elements are positive in the sense that I'm starting to see more of that collaboration. The other thing I'm starting to see more of, which is interesting to me, is innovation. Every day I'm seeing a new golf startup or entity. If we look at the clothing and apparel industry, Reflow is one example. So we did work with them in our previous seasons. They produce.
We had Reflow CEO on our show
Oh, I did not know you had Rory.
2 years ago. We had Rory.
Amazing.
2 years
so
ago,
you're
he
ahead
was
of
on
the
our.
curve. See?
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah, we know him very
Oh,
well.
that's so good.
Yeah, and I love what he did. It's amazing. It's amazing what he managed to do. It was not easy,
Absolutely.
but we champion what he does.
Absolutely. So people like that who are pushing the edge, they are, looking at a problem in golf and they're saying, okay, I can find a solution to that. We are seeing that. The other day I saw, I think, somebody else in golf who is looking at recognizing that it's expensive to join a golf club. So they're looking at ways to create like low cost entry routes to golf membership.
Yeah.
And then also you've got virtual golf as well, like Caddy Club, Pitch, etc.
Yeah.
So I think the innovation aspect is interesting. From a sustainability perspective, there are a lot of opportunities there. One of the things we're looking at as an organization is potentially PIF funding concepts where golf balls are lost, like millions of them a year. How can we use drones to retrieve lost golf balls and basically recycle them back into the system of the game? So there's, I think, brilliant opportunities because we're seeing the converge between innovation, tech, and golf. And then I think the collaboration, where I think there's still a way to go, is the governance, and that's because it is quite fragmented. I don't know if that will change, but as long as there are collectives, there are committees, there are opportunities, events for us to come together and converge, hopefully that will break down the silos, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. You spoke earlier about you having a project in South Africa now with golf. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Now, doing that, Josephina, how do you design such an event, or together with whatever is linked to that event? Could be other stuff. How do you manage within the design standpoint? How do you create a lasting value for local communities in South Africa, for example?
Absolutely. This is a super, super important point, and I feel very, very passionate about this. So I, as the agency, work with my counterpart at Live Golf, Jake Jones. So he will explain his ambition in terms of what he wants to achieve, and I will give advice as to what I think are the best ways to achieve that. So some of the things which, we've discussed and are kind of working on is the fact that South Africa, as we know, has that history, obviously, of apartheid and obviously of racial inequity. And what can we do to bridge that gap through the game of golf? So there's a few things we can do. So the event is taking place in Stain City, which is essentially just out of Joburg. We recognize, I particularly recognize, that there are loads of townships where Black people are living in conditions which, don't marry up to their white counterparts.
Is it a one-off event or?
It's a multi-year contract, but I can't comment on how
Fantastic.
far that reaches. But
Yeah.
so the idea is, as well, that's a really good important point. When I'm delivering social impact, I never want to deliver one-off initiatives. I always want to deliver something with legacy. So we are in conversation with Stain City local authorities, the Live Golf Stingers GC, which is basically the South African team, are heavily involved, and their foundation. One of the initiatives is about taking primary school children within Diepsloot, which is the one of the townships quite close to the golf course, that houses communities that are deprived, and exposing them to golf as an opportunity from a well-being standpoint, giving pastoral care, emotional care as well to the families, the schools, providing them with equipment from an education standpoint. So I think that is exposure and early years opportunity for young people for them to understand that there is opportunity out there for them. The other aspect which we are in conversations about currently is, so Oji Molefe is a Black South African broadcaster in golf, and I'm having conversations with him about how do we actually look at the professional golf pathway, because it's often very difficult to understand how you actually, get to being pro. So we're looking at an opportunity to potentially fund golf equipment and, PGA training for Black amateur golfers who are talented enough to become pro, but they just lack, those resources to get there. So that's something we're working on at the moment. So I'm quite excited about the South African event. We're also looking operationally from a sustainability perspective at biofuels and working with Black-owned fuel providers as well. So there's so many opportunities there, and I'm quite excited about, the potential for what we can achieve in South Africa.
Fantastic. Get Tiger Woods as well.
No, unfortunately.
Get him.
Unfortunately.
You will. Yeah. And, sometimes you need a figure like Tiger, especially to inspire the little ones.
I think that's a really, really important topic, and I have deep conversations with my good friend Ray. I don't know if you know Black British golfers, but they're an association that focuses on getting more Black British people into golf. And I have good conversations with him about this, because if, for example, he gets young people, Gen Z age, sometimes millennials, but into golf through virtual golf. He often is positioned in Greenwich, East London, and so on. One thing he does is he always asks the young people who they know, who's famous in golf, do they know anyone? And what's quite sad is Gen Z, apparently there's a number of Gen Z people that don't know who Tiger Woods is.
Kidding?
Serious, genuinely do not know who he is, as in his name or visually. And when you think about the weight of Tiger Woods for the golf industry, how powerful he was and still is, there are people out there that do, young Black people that do not know who he is. And I think that's quite scary and dangerous, because as time changes, losing such representation and understanding of the weight of that representation is kind of scary. And we almost have to find a new Tiger.
What he did to the sport, Josephina. What he did to the sport, it's massive, absolutely massive. He lifted the entire golf worldwide.
Absolutely. I've been reading. I've got it here today. This is my current read.
Can you lift again the book? Sorry.
If you want to do a picture. But I've been reading literally.
Fantastic. We cannot deny that there is no one I talk to when it comes to golf that doesn't know Tiger. You know, you like him or you hate him. His legacy is beyond the person. What he did to golf, it's amazing. It's just amazing.
Absolutely. Like the brand
Yeah.
deals, like golf didn't get those brand deals before. Like
No,
he really
no,
put it on a
absolutely
different
not.
level. It was like
No, the
MJ level. Yeah.
viewership, the streaming
Yeah.
services, the deals that went behind, because of him.
Yeah.
When he was, I mean, bless him, he's been injured. The minute there is a noise that he might turn up, he might come back to XYZ tournament, or it's like
Frenzy.
euphoria,
Absolutely.
frenzy,
So it's kind of
absolutely
scary to
crazy.
me. Like we almost need to find a new Tiger, because what happens when we lose like that, you know, the people that, don't even know he exists at this stage, what
Yeah,
happens then?
yeah.
So I think there is something about golf, and that's why I'm excited about breaking barriers and doing things differently, especially the live product, because if we can find like emerging new talent, then, the longevity for the sport is there.
Especially for the little ones, boys or girls, it doesn't matter. You need a figure like this to inspire them to. Similar with any sport, soccer, basketball, you name it. It's and golf has been, as a sport, been fortunate to have someone like Tiger. You know, so yeah.
Highly agree.
Let's shift gear and talk about something that is really dear to me, Josephina. Why do you believe equal pay remains so elusive in elite sport when it comes to gender between women and men?
So I think there's a few factors there. So I think
Mm,
there is people will say, is it generating enough revenue? For example, some people will say that argument. You know, are we bringing the sponsors to enable that level of pay? And I think you could have made that argument maybe 5-10 years ago. I think if you look at the game of particularly like football and also rugby, it is actually making those steps, and we are seeing bigger sponsorships and more viewership and so on. So I think that argument is slowly becoming weaker in terms of the ROI, but it is an argument which is made. The Obviously on the converse to that is the fact that it's at the end of the day, it's the same sport being played. So that argument around equity is that we should value it the same. And I always like to speak about kind of emerging markets and um, diverse audiences and the power they have financially, because I think when you look at some of the events that we manage, when you overlook particular demographics, you lose from a return perspective, because women are picking up, I'll speak to golf, women are picking up golf, I think, at the highest rate. I don't have the stat to me right now, but I will check it. But that as an audience, if you overlook that, you're missing a huge opportunity from a marketing standpoint. So I think when we talk about equity and when we talk about women's pay, we need to recognize that the world is changing and demographics are changing and target audiences are changing as well. And so the
Yeah.
weight of the women's game is growing. And I can see that, for one, I can say definitely in golf. Um, I will speak to the fact that there are initiatives in place. So for us, 54, we have one of our entities called Voxa, which is basically a
Mhm.
women's talent agency. And we specifically go out and look for female talent, female golfing talent, to sponsor, to support with partnerships. Um, and we see it as our role to amplify that talent, because, you know, we understand where the industry is heading. And, you know, also we have partners in this space such as Golf Saudi and PIF, and people have a lot to say about Saudi, but I will say they are putting their money where their mouth is. So the PIF Global Series is the highest paid female golfing tournament in the world. So no other entity is paying women what Saudi are for golf. The other thing to say is that the entity also has gender equality initiatives, particularly offering paid leave for paid professionals, and then also looking at supporting women through fertility, because I think that's something which we ought to talk about, because the weight that women carry, well, through childbearing, but also like unpaid work as being a mother, is not accounted for. And I think the ability to have paid time to look at, and also to go through IVF, which I think PIF actually does provide to sportswomen under their contract. So I think putting your money where your mouth is super important, and the fact that we have partners that have initiatives in this space is worth talking about, and is worth kind of noting, because the inequity of being able to carry all of that additional work and having initiatives in place that actually address that, I think is something which is important.
I mean, when it comes to visibility and audience, let's use as an example the Olympic Games, summer or winter. Right now is the Winter Olympics in Milano Cortina, and the female disciplines. I compare 4 years ago or even 8 years ago, it's a completely different league, from a performance standpoint, from the spectacle, the show, the entertainment, And I still keep scratching my head how long it has to take to have the same, I will not say opportunities, but the same recognition, put it this way.
You're right.
Yeah.
And I think we'll start to see it, because if you look at the likes of, like, for example, Chloe Kim, and, if we look at tennis, the sponsorships that we are seeing, I think it's improving, but it's improving, but it will take time. And I think hopefully the heavyweights coming out of the US and the EU hopefully will carry a lot of that and enable it to be equitable across the global scale. Because I'm conscious that depending on where you play as a woman, and if you're playing out of Africa or Asia, you're not going to maybe not get the same sponsorship opportunities as somebody coming out of the US. So I think that's worth noting as well. It's a difficult one, and it will take time. But I think hopefully with entities like ourselves that are marketing and are pushing female talent out there, so in a way which is exciting, not just like a charitable case. It's exciting to watch these games, pay to watch them.
Yeah. I think when you look at the US soccer team, women team, couple of years ago, they had to fight, they had to boycott, they had to, I will not say scream, but make noise to for the first time in the history of women's sport to have the same pay, and why it has to be like that, the governing bodies, the international governing bodies and the local governing bodies should, because everyone is promoting gender equality and things like that, but the minute you put the pay topic on a table, majority are silent. And I don't understand. Is it a mindset? And quite often we hear the same question, we still need more time. More time for what? Anyway, we can talk about this topic for days.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's it's something which cannot be justified, but the only way we can fight that fight through us, particularly as a marketing agency, is telling those stories, pushing it out there, putting women's talent in front of sponsors and saying this is worth it. And if we keep doing that, hopefully we will see that change.
You're listening to the PreZero Sports Talk. For more conversations on sports leadership, faith, performance, and innovation from Sweden to the world, visit PreZeroSportsTalk.com. Great, it's time for our lightning round.
Oh, okay.
Ready for speedy Q&A?
Okay, we'll see.
So, morning person or a night owl?
I was late today, so I think that answers the question. Night owl. It's a bit of a shame because I feel like the world doesn't like us. So it's a difficult one because I want to live in my truth as a night owl, but then it means I'm late to everything. And
Coffee, tea, or something else?
Tea. I'm a tea person, which makes things awkward when everyone's like, "Do you want to get a coffee?" And I'm like, "No." But yeah, I am a tea person. Yeah.
Yeah, a book that changed how you think.
Should I show the book again?
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So I'm very like I really love this book. I'm actually going to take a screenshot, but because
When was it published, the book?
it
This is the first time I've seen it.
2019, I believe. So
2019.
2018.
18.
Yeah, 18.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah,
I see
so
that. Yeah.
I'm going to do a screenshot just because. Very quickly. My view is that I'm really interested in messy problems. And so when I read about people who are genius in their fields, I feel like it gives me ideas and ways to resolve problems and things like that. And one thing I've really learned about reading about him is that he was never, how can I say it? I have to be careful choosing my words. It's not that he was born a genius at golf. He persisted. He literally played golf like almost like to a point of obsession because through his dad, he was in a sense forced to, but it kind of gives you that advice that persistence will get you to success. So you might not be the best at something, but if you do it consistently every day, if you obsess over it and you don't stop, you're almost like knocking down on a door. It will eventually fall down. You will get there. So I think that has been a really, really helpful bit of advice from Tiger's life, which is kind of been interesting about the whole genius versus who works harder aspect. Yeah.
Persistence, commitment, hard work, showing up, and never pull the plug.
Absolutely.
Never give.
Agree.
Yeah. A mentor who left a mark.
So for this one, to be honest, I kind of struggled with, because I feel like I don't think I have one particular person, and I feel like I take value from different people and everyday people that I meet, because I feel like everybody has something to give to the world and to society, and I think I'm inspired by different things. So when I say that, I mean the kind of people in my kind of network and my community are so varied. So, you know, I talk to people who are scientists, I talk to people who are in the arts field, and I feel like everyone has different value to give. And so I kind of feel like I don't have a number one mentor. And also a lot of people that inspire me, I wouldn't even call them a mentor. They're just a friend, or they're just somebody I know of. Okay. So I don't have a number one mentor, but I feel like what I will say is be inspired by everyone, because everyone has something to give to the world that you perhaps may not have thought of. So that's my response.
A city you love working in.
So I feel like if it's not work, it would be somewhere in the Caribbean. But the Caribbean, I was in Antigua for...
I don't blame you.
I was in Antigua this Christmas, and it was amazing, but I couldn't imagine like actually working, because I would be. But yeah, work. So in terms of the cities I've traveled to, I did really like Singapore, because I feel like it's a city where this is what happens when a state prioritizes the well-being of their citizens. Like everything is built to make everyone's life easier and simpler, even if they don't, you know, have a lot financially. They're provided for. They have housing. You know, I think it's a city that prioritizes the betterment of its citizens. So I really appreciated the way it was structured, and I also like nice hot weather as well. So that wasn't bad.
A song that gets you energized.
Okay. I think this was one where I said I wasn't quite sure if it was safe for the podcast. I don't have a particular song, but at the moment I'm listening to a lot of like rap music, because I feel like rap music is just like, go get your dreams, do what you want. Like, so,
I get you.
And I'm into strength training these days, so it's doing what it needs to do.
Right. A best way to unwind after a tough day, or let's say a tough week.
Yeah. So I've been really into moving my body, in the sense of I've got quite a bit of a heavy schedule. So I do strength training, I do swimming, golf, and I also do a bit of Pilates and yoga. So I think, and to be honest, this wasn't always me. I'll be honest, I was somebody who would be like, just read or just like very kind of sedentary, and that's not good. And I've made a conscious decision like this year to do more movement. And I'm actually, I'm a changed person because I see the benefits. It really does clear your mind, and absolutely.
Yeah. And on golf, do you get frustrated?
Oh, so I feel like this is where you need to be, that sense of delusion is necessary, because otherwise to come back every week and to play it, you have to be deluded to some degree that you're gonna, because I think my best shot was like, what, 6 feet to the pin or something like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, amazing. And then the next one is just like absolutely horrible. So you have to just be, you have to be deluded. Otherwise, I do like that it's a mental game. Because it's discipline.
It's very demanding. It's very demanding when it comes to mental.
It is.
It's very, very demanding. One day you get it right, the next day,
awful.
out of the window.
So how do you, how do you measure yourself? And I think it's that point again, persistence. I'm trying to create consistency, and that is my goal.
It's a tough sport. It's a really difficult sport. And while we were talking about Tiger Woods. It's for me, like we say in French, chapeau. Hats off. He ticked the box, and he's still,
absolutely.
Josephina, if you could have a dinner with a historical figure, who would it be and why?
Very interesting one.
Take your time.
Yes.
We all have someone that we admire or So who would it be?
I'm trying not to choose someone
who would you pick?
Controversial. Because
No, go ahead.
I do like messy problems. So I'm curious about people that have been involved in messy problems and how they've navigated them. Maybe I have a think on that one.
Okay.
I'll think.
A trend in sustainability that excites you.
Okay, this one I can do. So I feel like, to a degree, I'm probably going to get some hate for this, but AI, in the sense that I think, as I mentioned before, about data, dirty data, and trying not to waste all of your time on data, there is something around AI replacing the data capture process. So I'm not saying it interferes with integrity of data. We'd still need to have that data within our ecosystem, whether that's documents, Excel sheets, emails, etc. But the task of spending hours of chasing people for data, I think AI's ability to pull data automatically from, the ecosystem of your computer, so that you can then crack on and understand the impact that your organization is having. I think that's exciting. To not spend 90% of your time chasing data, I think, is something exciting. So we'll see.
Hey.
We'll see where it gets to.
Your legacy in one sentence.
Wow. I think for me, I'm a bit unstoppable in the sense that, like, I have had uphill battles personally, professionally, and I'm a little bit deluded. Like, I just always get up and I keep going. I'm always like, no matter what comes my way, no matter the setback, I'm always going to keep going. And I think, to a degree, that has helped me get to where I am today, because even if somebody says no, I reflect and I pivot and I find a way forward. So I try to be unstoppable.
Josephina Oji, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your insights with our audience.
Thank you so much. It's been a super interesting conversation, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been great. It's been therapy for me as well.
Thank you. And to our listeners, I leave you with a few words from Angela Davis. One said, "I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things that I cannot accept." Today's conversation reminds us that sport, at its best, can be a vehicle for exactly that kind of change. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid.
We want to thank you for joining our show. If you enjoyed this episode, we have more for you. You can now watch the entire episode on our YouTube and Spotify channels. While you're here, subscribe and don't forget to tap the bell. Visit PreZeroSportsTalk.com to explore more conversations on sports, leadership, faith, performance, and innovation. From Sweden to the world. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and make a difference. We'll see you soon. Take care.